Hey friends, Wayne over here at the Ram Man Inc. Don't forget the ink. There's some helpful information right there on that board so that you can get a hold of us. It may help you out. So, today I'm going to come to you as a wheel end expert engineer instead of brakes engineer, and we're going to go over wheel ends and some hubs. So, where does my credibility come from? Well, considering that we make more locking hub conversions ourselves in-house than anybody else in the world. That's number one. Number two, as far as I know, we are also the only manufacturer that's doing any locking hubs with an IFS system, such as a Chevrolet or a Dodge. We service all the Dodges, half-tons, and the Chevrolet. Half-tons, three-quarter tons, and this is a 1-ton. Today we're going to be talking about the cheesy Ford F-150 setup. Basically from about 2010 or so on up. Now, y'all boys are running these cheesy ass shafts, cheesy, with this gear on the end. So instead of engaging things from the end like's been done since the beginning of time when you're running locking hubs, they reversed it and decided to run it on the inside. Well, you know, when you first look at this setup, from my point of view, it looks just cheesy as shit. And of course, you know, you guys have got, y'all F-150 guys have got all kinds of problems with this setup. These actuators are constantly blowing out. They don't work. They don't leak. They do leak. They don't engage all the way. Well, let me tell you something from the get-go. This design right here, in my opinion, was flawed from the get-go. Now, you got to understand that this is basically a super modern setup. And Ford has played around with locking hubs and automatic hubs for several decades. So, the first hubs were pulse vacuum. The second hubs were constant vacuum. And these IWEs, whatever you want to call it, actuators and shit, these are a constant vacuum too. But here's where the fundamental flaw is. I need you to understand. All manufacturers of the trucks have initially designed so that the front hubs are disengaged. The default, or no work put in, that the hubs would be disengaged. The assumption is, which is a standard assumption, is most vehicles are not driven near as much in four-wheel drive as they are in two-wheel drive. You take a four-wheel drive truck here in America, it's got 100,000 miles on it. I want you to think about something. Most vehicles, I'm not talking about the farmer every 1 in 1,000, and I'm not talking about the guy that has the house in Taos that goes every weekend. I'm talking about the average guy in Fort Worth, Texas, or Miami Beach, or Phoenix, Arizona, or whatever. You know, 10 miles in four-wheel drive is quite a distance. Most people use four-wheel drives, pull out their boat, go deliver hay on the ranch, or yada yada. It's normally a very short distance. It's normally an extremely short distance. So, you know, it's like 0.001% Anyway, enough of that. So, these new IWEs are actuators. The default, going against the grain of all previous designs and manufacturers, when this thing doesn't have any vacuum applied, its front end is engaged. So, if there's any fault with the vacuum mechanism at all, actuators, hoses, solenoids, check valves, all that old bullshit, vacuum tanks, vacuum reservoirs, if there's any leak at all, that means that these things engage. So, the way they disengage them is you gotta apply vacuum. You gotta apply your vacuum. You can do it with your mouth. Looky there. So number one, you gotta have vacuum to disengage. So essentially you have full-time, full-wheel drive. So basically the hubs, all four hubs are engaged. We won't even say full-wheel drive, it may be in a static state. Anyway, these front things are engaged all the time. Now, in order for them to use a vacuum mechanism or vacuum motor, that's what we call these old timers, vacuum motors. You apply a vacuum to it and it moves things. The only problem with a vacuum motor is they can't move things very far. They can't move things very far. So, that's why you have little bitty thin gears. These aren't spline, these are special gear profile so that they can mesh together to help these things engage when you're on the move or they're spinning. So, because you got a vacuum gizmo, you see this right here? There's your little bitty thin row of teeth. Little bitty thin row of teeth. Kind of reminds you of a little bitty thin row of teeth. This is a factory Ford locker. You see how those gears are wore? Yeah. See how thin those are? You see how thin that is? Now, there's the two of them together. See, those are not spline, those are gear teeth. So, when you're trying to engage something on the move, like in a transmission or something like this, the lower the number of the teeth, the more likelihood of the engagement. And the profiles are done so that they can couple together much like a transmission. Because you guys didn't know it, but these damn things are engaging on their own all the time. For everybody's got that Borg-Warner TOD, torque on demand transfer case. So that little bitty cheesy coupler right there, that thing is going to halfway mesh those things together. You with me? What we're getting at is there's not a whole lot of teeth engagement. Now you can understand. Back again. This is the design that by default the hubs are engaged. All previous designs of other people and Ford, they were disengaged. Normal mode is disengaged and they never disengage on their own. Can't do it. Not unless you press a button, if you got the Ford vacuum hubs, or if you got the manual hubs, you need to get out and turn your locker. You with me? So, they had to go to these teeth and a skinny profile because vacuum motors and stuff in general can't move things very far. So this little coupler has to couple the two of them together. Yeah, I know. Not a lot of engagement. So you can understand that if anything in this circuit vacuum circuit begins to fail, since these got an 8-pound spring on them, they stay engaged. And of course, if your system does work right and they disengage, but they don't disengage all the way, you get that terrible rattling noise. You know it? But when I look at this, after having more experience with this personally than anybody else in the world, when I initially look at this setup compared to a Chevrolet or a Dodge, I immediately think to myself, boy, this is some cheesy shit. This looks like that cheesy shit back in the 90s. Now let me remind you, these vacuum actuators and vacuum hubs are not a new phenomenon. I remember when they came out in the 90s, and if you're old enough, anybody watching this will kind of know what I'm talking about. They had a really bad rep. Sometimes they would engage, sometimes they would disengage, sometimes that you needed to go in reverse to disengage them. Well, shit, that didn't help. Every time you went in reverse, you lost your two-wheel drive, and it depended on manufacturers. But the bottom line is, vacuum hubs and lockers, they just didn't work that well. That's one of the reasons Chrysler moved on 3 times doing the central axle disconnect, the CAD. Chevrolet's got the same sort of thing, and they got rid of that stuff. The other thing about this, when I look at this, all this shit is exposed to the environment. It's right here in a really, really harsh environment. If you honestly believe that this get up right here is going to last for any length of time in harsh conditions, shit. Well, I tell you what, I'll sell you something else. Couple times through the mud hole, and this will never work again. Going back to spline hubs or normal technology, most of this stuff that engages and disengages is inside a hub. It's at least protected by some shape, form, or fashion. And it's not exposed to every single environmental thing that there is. Well, doggone it. Are you with me? At least you got some kind of protection. The other thing is, you'll notice with splines, there is an extremely positive engagement, and there's a length. See that Jeep shaft? Dana 60 shaft. Another style shaft. Old Dana 44. Half of that, because you're only getting about half the depth. Half of this one and half of that one. You can't get much because the coupler's only that wide. It's only a half an inch, so you only got a quarter of an inch engagement, you know, in full engagement. There you go. It's engaged. You see it? It's engaged. We put some vacuum on it and it'll disengage. We can do the same thing. If we pull this up 1/8 of an inch, it'll begin to rotate. That's all the engagement that there is. Yeah, pretty cheesy. Pretty damn cheesy, wouldn't you say? So, what we need to do is, we need to design a set of locking hubs for you Ford boys, whether you got the shipped on the fly transmission or that TOD transfer case. You gotta understand with that TOD that you're never in two-wheel drive mode. You're the backseat driver. The computer, powertrain module, and the transfer case module all make the decisions for you. And your vacuum actuators are engaging and disengaging all the time. They've got that cold weather feature where they engage for miles before, to warm everything up in the pumpkin. I mean, man, I could go on and on. I feel sorry for you. What a disaster for you guys. God bless you. God bless America. And happy trucking. Bye.